going to look at one of the most famous shipwrecks of all time, the focus of all those documentaries and Hollywood movies. But there's one version of Titanic we have never seen until this morning.
That's right, experts have used special technology to map the entire ship on the ocean floor and create its digital twin. And our science editor, Rebecca Morell.
A rusty old camera, encrusted with the salts of time, was plucked from the icy depths of the North Atlantic, unveiling images that chill the bone. The Titanic in its final, ghastly moments. While the story of the Titanic's ill-fated voyage is no stranger to our screens, these haunting photos strip bare a raw truth never seen before. What harrowing tales do these images whisper from beneath the waves?
You won't find bodies at Titanic. You won't find skeletons. The bones actually dissolve into solution very rapidly at that depth.
Dive with us into the abyss as we expose these strange revelations. The Titanic's hidden prelude. While the Titanic's tragedy has been immortalized in film and lore, a narrative remains untold, hidden beneath the waves, and forgotten until now. For over a century, the echoes of that night have haunted the annals of history, but these newly discovered photos offer a grim chapter we've never been privy to. As historians pore over these images, they uncover clues that challenge our understanding of that fateful night. Join us on a fascinating journey as we explore some rare images that capture the essence of this significant event, offering a closer look at what happened before, during, and after the tragedy. In a surprising discovery, we'll guide you through the contents of an old camera found at the bottom of the ocean, which reveals chilling photos of the Titanic. Don't worry, there are no human remains in these images. Bones dissolve quickly at such depths. To fully understand the story, we need to start from the beginning. Let's go back to March 31st, 1909, a date that marked the start of something unforgettable when the construction of this magnificent ship began in Belfast, Ireland. The shipbuilding company Harland and Wolff, along with its skilled designers and engineers, put all their expertise into creating a ship that would become a legend in maritime history. People eagerly awaited the day it would set sail on its maiden voyage, but little did they know that this first journey would also be its last. At the time, the White Star Line, the company that owned these ships, was doing extremely well. Business was booming, and the future looked bright. But no one could have foreseen the disastrous event that nearly ruined the company. These early photos from the Titanic's construction days, before it met its fate in the cold waters of the North Atlantic, serve as a time capsule, showing the doomed ship as it towered over the landscape around it. But there was a darker side to its story. From the start, the Titanic seemed to be followed by bad luck. Even during its construction, there were tragic incidents, with 8 workers losing their lives under unusual circumstances. Finally, on March 31st, 1912, the Titanic was finished and quickly became the talk of the world. Everyone was eager to be among the first to step aboard this new wonder of the world. Yet, despite all the excitement, there were dark events on the horizon that no one could see. For 2 years, the world had been eagerly waiting for this giant ship to set sail on its first voyage, completely unaware of the disaster that was coming. But this wasn't the Titanic's first time on the water. On April 2nd, 1912, it had sailed from its birthplace in Belfast to Southampton, getting ready for what would be its first and ill-fated journey. Many around the world eagerly waited for the journey. Little did anyone know, it would soon turn tragic. The ship was set to first stop in Cherbourg, France, then Cobh, Ireland, before heading to New York. On the return trip, it was supposed to go from New York to Plymouth, then Cherbourg, and finally back to Southampton. Around the time the Titanic was being loaded and prepared for its voyage, a coal strike was happening. This strike meant that the coal needed for the journey had to be collected from other ships within the White Star Line fleet. Even though the strike ended before the Titanic set off, there wasn't enough time to get all the coal needed. The ship was designed to carry a maximum of 3,547 people, including 905 first-class passengers, 564 in second class, and 1,134 in third class. The ship was also staffed by 944 officers and crew members, many of whom would later sacrifice their lives trying to save as many passengers as they could. Just as the Titanic was about to leave, something went wrong. A near collision. Before tragedy, a small but potentially dangerous incident occurred as the Titanic was about to leave. As the ship moved away from its berth, it caused a large water displacement. This force caused the SS New York, another ship nearby, to break free from its moorings and drift dangerously close to the Titanic. This sight shocked the crowd of thousands who feared a collision. Fortunately, the situation was quickly controlled, and the Titanic continued on its way. But this wasn't the worst part. After the Titanic tragically sank, many wondered if this earlier incident was a warning sign of the disaster that was to come. While we can only speculate, these early moments and the following events have left a lasting mark on maritime history. The photographs taken during the Titanic's maiden voyage give us a glimpse into the significance of the ship and its wide appeal. They take us back to the days leading up to one of the most infamous maritime tragedies. As the ship sailed on, many on board were unaware of the dangers ahead, including a fire quietly burning in the coal bunkers. Did you know that the Titanic was already on fire before it even set sail on its first and only voyage? Surprisingly, this famous ship had a huge fire burning in its coal bunkers for 10 days before it left the dock. For over 100 years, people have debated how much this fire played a role in the Titanic's tragic end.
There is some new data that now suggests that that bunker fire may actually be responsible for the fact that 700 people made it off the ship.
If you look at photos from that time, you can see the damage from the fire on the ship's hull, which suggests that trouble was brewing right from the start. After the Titanic sank, an investigation revealed that the crew had been battling a stubborn coal fire in the lower decks, a fire they could never fully put out. Although the exact cause of the fire remains a mystery, the damage it caused to the ship's structure is something that can't be ignored. Most agree that while the fire didn't directly sink the Titanic, it weakened the ship, making it more vulnerable to the following disaster. A journalist named Sinan Maloney, who has spent years digging into the truth behind the Titanic's sinking, came across some old photos in an attic in England. These pictures show a long, dark mark on the Titanic's hull, evidence of the fire's lasting impact. Strangely enough, this mark was right where the Titanic later struck the iceberg, beginning its tragic end. These discoveries make you wonder what might have happened had the fire weakened the ship's side. It's hard to understand why the ship's officers decided to set sail, knowing the danger that was smoldering below. Was it overconfidence or a disregard for passenger safety? We may never know the full truth, but this decision shows that the Titanic was already dealing with serious problems before it even began its journey. These problems came together in a terrible chain of events that led to one of the most tragic maritime disasters in history. But this isn't the whole story. There are even more surprising details about the Titanic's sinking that remain uncovered. These new findings are likely to be shocking. Among the key elements of this old tale is the iceberg that struck the Titanic, causing it to sink quickly into the icy waters of the Atlantic on April 14, 1912. The ship met its end in a sea full of icebergs, a danger that the crew tragically underestimated. Where did this deadly iceberg come from, and what do we know about its journey? While there are only theories, some believe it might have broken off from the Jakobshavn Glacier. As the ship moved away, hidden dangers in the cold waters ahead waited silently. The Titanic's tragic prelude. Around 1910 or 1911, near Disco Bay on Greenland's western coast, a glacier formed and likely drifted north, carried by the West Greenland Current. When Captain Edward John Smith and his crew set out on their journey to New York, they were well aware that the ice fields they were about to cross were unusually large. The Titanic had received several warnings about the dangerous ice ahead. Many ships that had sailed through the same cold waters sent radio messages to the Titanic, warning them about the ice fields and the tall icebergs. The first warning came from a French ship, La Lorraine, at 5:46 p.m. on April 12th, alerting the Titanic's crew about thick ice in the area where the Titanic would later face its tragic end. The next day, the Titanic passed by a Dutch steamer named Rappahannock. While it's unclear if Rappahannock directly warned the Titanic about the dangerous ice ahead, we know that the ice had already damaged Rappahannock. This encounter could have served as a crucial warning to the Titanic about the dangers that lay ahead. On April 13th, the Titanic received several more messages about the ice fields. One of the earliest came at 9:12 a.m. from the Coronian, describing not just icebergs, but also large chunks of floating ice, called growlers and vast ice fields. Despite this, Captain Smith remained confident in his ship's abilities and simply acknowledged the Coronian's warning with a "thank you." Throughout the day, more warnings about the ice came to the Titanic, but they were mostly ignored. The result of this disregard was the Titanic's collision with an iceberg, leading to the sinking of the ship
and the loss of over 1,500 lives.
But that's not where the story ends. Recently, a fascinating discovery was made deep underwater. An old camera that belonged to Seaman W. Wood, a crew member and an avid photographer on the Titanic. This camera contains photos that show the harsh reality of those dangerous moments on the Titanic, providing a rare look into the chaotic scenes aboard the doomed ship. 2 days before the Titanic sank, the captain of the SS Estonian spotted a massive iceberg. He was struck by its size, took a photo, and noted where it was. Interestingly, the location he marked was the same spot where the Titanic would later hit an iceberg. This makes us wonder if it was the same iceberg that led to the Titanic's disaster, although we can't be certain. Dr. Washington Dodge, a well-known doctor and politician, was one of the first to write a detailed account of the Titanic's final hours after he escaped to safety. His writing, done in a rush, captures the fear and panic of the moment. He, his wife Ruth, and their son were asleep when the iceberg struck. After the collision, Dodge went to the deck to find out what had happened and was mistakenly told that everything was fine. But he wasn't convinced and soon discovered the danger was real. He quickly grabbed life jackets for his family, and they barely made it to a lifeboat in time. With each passing moment, the risks grew, though hidden from the passengers. The last lifeboats of lost lives. Dodge was critical of how the evacuation was handled. Many lifeboats were not filled to capacity, which could have saved more lives. Additionally, the rule that women and children should go first didn't work as well as expected, leading to more unnecessary losses. Dodge managed to get on a lifeboat himself, which had a tense moment when it was lowered into water rushing from the ship. Fortunately, they avoided being swamped, but the worst part was yet to come. Dodge's story gives us a first-hand look at the human errors and the tragic loss of life during the Titanic's sinking, showing just how devastating that night was. Deep beneath the ocean, recent explorations have revealed surprising new photos of the Titanic. Among these discoveries is a particularly striking image found in an old camera. This photo captures a crucial moment during the disaster when water began flooding the ship, forcing everyone on board, no matter their age or wealth, into a desperate fight for survival. The image powerfully shows the chaotic struggle to escape, a moment where people faced almost impossible odds. It's a vivid reminder of our ability to push through even the toughest situations. As the Titanic neared its final moments, efforts to save as many lives as possible became frantic. People were rushed into lifeboats, which were then launched into the cold, dark night. Out of the 2,229 people on board that tragic night, more than half lost their lives in the freezing Atlantic waters. It's shocking to realize that the Titanic had only 20 lifeboats, of which only 18 were used, and many of those weren't even filled to capacity. The fear that the lifeboats might collapse under too much weight made the situation even worse. But the lifeboat problem didn't end there. Questions remain about why some lifeboats didn't return to rescue more passengers. Reports suggest that many crew members were afraid that they would be overwhelmed by people in the water or dragged down by the sinking ship. This fear led them to stay away from the sinking vessel, leaving many passengers stranded, their cries gradually disappearing into the icy night. This issue with the lifeboats is still a topic of intense debate, While people focus on the shortage and poor use of lifeboats, the vastness of the ocean and the unfolding tragedy continue to echo through history, reminding us of the tough choices made during those critical hours. The Titanic was designed to stay afloat longer after an accident, which would have given enough time for rescue operations. Sadly, the ship sank much faster than anyone had expected. The issue of not having enough lifeboats still sparks debate today and raises questions about the moral choices made by those in charge, choices that led directly to the loss of many lives. After the disaster, more secrets about that night began to come out. How a hidden fire doomed the Titanic. When we look closer at why the Titanic sank and broke in half, several factors come into play. Just minutes after the ship hit the iceberg, water began flooding through a tear in its side. A hidden fire in one of the coal bunkers had already been weakening the ship's structure. When passengers realized the ship was doomed, the lower compartments were filling rapidly with water, causing a dangerous imbalance. This imbalance, along with the weight of the water in the compartments, put enormous stress on the ship's structure. At around 2:17 a.m., just over 2 hours after the collision, this stress caused the ship to break in half near its middle, right beneath its smokestacks. The break happened at a particularly weak spot made of brittle iron rivets, a surprising choice given the ship's enormous budget. It's still unclear whether this structural failure sped up the sinking. As the Titanic split, the horrifying sound of the ship tearing apart echoed through the night. Survivors watched in shock as the rear of the ship disappeared into the icy Atlantic, taking thousands of lives with it. This tragic moment is one of the most heartbreaking in maritime history, highlighting the critical need for strict safety measures and ethical decisions in shipbuilding. As the tragic events of that night unfolded, everyone was asking the same question: where was Captain Edward John Smith? His actions during the disaster have been debated for years, and no one has clear answers. Witnesses said they saw Captain Smith on the Titanic's bridge soon after the ship hit the iceberg. As the night grew more terrifying, Captain Smith faced the downfall of a career that had spanned over 40 years. He knew that some of his decisions had led to the chaos. For instance, while he focused on less critical tasks, he neglected important safety measures like conducting a lifeboat drill. This drill could have better prepared the crew and passengers, possibly saving more lives. As the Titanic sank deeper into the icy waters, Captain Smith took part in the evacuation efforts. There are stories of his bravery, including one where he reportedly saved a baby by swimming it to a lifeboat. Even though he had a chance to escape, he chose to stay on the ship, which many see as a sign of his courage. But some believe that Captain Smith was missing when his leadership was needed the most, as if he had abandoned his duties during a crucial moment. The details of Captain Smith's final moments are still debated. Some believe he survived and lived out his days in hiding on a remote island, citing that his body was never found. But this theory remains unproven and should be taken with caution. Captain Smith's role in the Titanic's tragic sinking continues to capture attention and spark discussion. Was he a hero or a villain? That question is still open to interpretation. Just days after the sinking, people were already talking about how to find the Titanic's wreckage, even though the technology of the time was limited. This ongoing curiosity ensures that Captain Smith's story will continue to be shared for generations, no matter how it's viewed. What do you think happened to Captain Smith after the Titanic sank? Share your theories below, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.